This is a review of the dissection of the pig. I'm running through this with two different pigs just to give you an idea of some of the phenotypic or physical differences in the structures that you see. I'm going to start at the top. We're going to look inside of the mouth at the epiglottis. So when I move the jaw and the tongue back on each of these, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this half moon flap right here. This is the epiglottis. You can see it's all the way at the base of the tongue. Now on this one, what I want you to notice between these two pigs is that this one is very light in color and this one is very dark in color. So that's why it's important to look at different pigs so that you can see the physical differences between two of your specimens, just like we look different externally or phenotypically externally, we do look different internally. So now I'm going to turn these pigs around. We're going to start from the top and take a look at some of the structures that you need to know. Now, only one of these pigs do I have the subclavian artery dissected out. So here you can see you have an artery. It's actually coming off of the aortic arch and it's running out to the arm. And so you have a large blood vessel that is servicing the arm. You'll have one on each side that's going to show you the subclavian on each side. In the neck, you have this harder knot structure that is the larynx. There's a larynx here and the larynx there. Extending down from the larynx is the trachea. And sitting on top of the trachea, you have the thyroid gland. The thyroid looks like a smooth bean. So here you can see the thyroid, light in color. Here, the thyroid's a little bit off to the side and it's a darker color, but just because of the way this was dissected. So here you can see the smooth bean. This is the thyroid, a little bit darker in structure. Underneath the trachea would be the esophagus. So if I go underneath here, this smooth muscular tube is the esophagus. And then here on this one, my arm's in the way. Here on this one is the esophagus. In the neck, you've got two major blood vessels on each side of the larynx, the trachea, the thyroid, esophagus. You have this lighter pink or whitish colored blood vessel. That's the carotid artery, and opposing it or next to it is the jugular vein. And you will see it on both sides of the neck. And this one doesn't have it dissected out very well, so we're just going to look at it here. Carotid artery, jugular vein. Now we're going to take a look at the heart area. Here on the heart, so here you have the heart. The heart, you won't see it very well on this one, but we'll talk about differences, why it's important to look at both of these, is the heart is enclosed and a protective bag helps the heart from overflowing with blood, but also gives the heart its own supply of blood, and this is called the pericardium. Now, depending on the dissection, this pericardium has been dissected away, so you don't really see it here. We can see a little bit of remnants of the pericardium right here on this heart. On top of the heart, you have a gland that's called the thymus gland, and you can see it a little bit better on this pig here. So this is the thymus gland, and it sits on top of the pericardium. If we pull back the pericardium, you're going to see two different structures on the heart. So this bottom lighter color, these are the ventricles. And then you can see over here the left atrium. This flap here is the left atrium. So on this pig, you can see that they are more similar in color. In this case, like if we look at this, is an atrium, sorry. And then this is the right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. The left atrium here is a little bit kind of brown and with some blue infused on there. And here you can see the aortic arch. And on this one here, it's harder to see, but we'll get there. And then right there between the atria is the aortic arch. Now this dissection is missing a whole side of lungs. Let's give you a better view of the aorta continues on down the body, and so this can show you the dorsal aorta, and the dorsal aorta continues all the way down, and then we'll show you a little bit further, but it does continue from the aortic arch down the body. We can't see that because the lung would be here. So on this dissection here, we're going to see that you have the lungs over here, and then also look how large you can see on this side. You can see the lungs. So one lung on each side. And this one you can see one of the lungs right here. Underneath the lung, there is a thin layer of muscle here, the diaphragm. The diaphragm helps to push and pull air in and out of the lungs. The diaphragm, thin muscle that sits on top of the liver. Here's the liver, diaphragm. This one has a lot of the diaphragm dissected out, but here you can see some remnants of the diaphragm, and you can see the liver here. If we take the liver and we look over on the right side of the pig, what you're going to see underneath and up and sitting right up against the liver, almost embedded in the bottom part. See this bag right here? This is the gallbladder. And then extending down from the gallbladder into the beginning of the small intestine, this little tiny tube, this is the common bile duct. So again, I'm going to show you on this one. This pig over here, you've got the liver. And if we lift up the liver, you see the bag underneath, the gallbladder, and the little tube right there going into the beginning of the small intestine, the common bile duct. Underneath the liver, on the left side of the pig, is a bag, the stomach. So here you can see stomach, quite large. And then over here, you can see it's a little bit darker in color. So here's the stomach. Stomach. On the side of the stomach, looks like a long, skinny tongue. Right here. This is the spleen. And then over here, the spleen's a little bit darker in color. And there you see the spleen. I'm gonna move the spleen and the stomach back. I'm gonna push the intestines down, and you see a bit of this lumpy stuff down here underneath the stomach and underneath the large intestines, and that's pancreas. Then again, over here, I'm gonna lift up the stomach, I'm gonna push the spleen aside, I'm gonna push down the intestines, and the pancreas is here. It's a little bit of lumpy stuff is pancreas. And when I push that spleen up, and the stomach back, and the intestines down, over to the side, I'm gonna push them over to the right side of the pig. What I'll see in the back area here is this is a kidney. And over here, you can see the kidney. It's not dissected out as much over here. Coming out of the kidney is a tube called a ureter or ureter. So right there, you can see the ureter or ureter, however you want to say it. I'm going to turn these around so we can better see the pelvic area. In terms of the intestines now, the intestines, you've got two kinds of intestines. You've got the large intestines. So these larger tubes here are the large intestines. And on this pig over here, you've got the large intestines. Sometimes the large intestines are a little more green, but not always. You just see a little bit difference in the large intestines here and here. And then the rest of the intestines, so I want to also mention that the large intestine, the bottom of the large intestine is the colon. You can see that here. And if we push the small intestines up, here you definitely can see that the large intestines are darker in color. The small intestines, there's a lot of tubes here and here. And one of the things that I want to point out is that you can't pull the small intestines out to a really long single tube, because what's holding the small intestines in place is a connective tissue called the mesentery. So this fan-like material it has all kinds of blood vessels within. That's mesentery. You can see the mesentery there. And then on this one, you don't see the blood vessels pop as much on this one, but you can see the mesentery holding the intestines in place. Here's the urinary bladder. Looks a bit different than it does on the human. And then here again, the urinary bladder. So this kind of flap from the umbilical cord, if we lift it up, underneath you're going to see the urinary bladder. And here again, got the umbilical cord. We lift up that flap that was made. You can see the urinary bladder. A couple other things I want to point out are, if we're looking at the rest of the dorsal aorta, so here, this whitish pinkish tube is the dorsal aorta. And then when we take a look at the bottom of the dorsal aorta, so if I move over the colon and all of these branches down here, hopefully you can notice all of these V and these little branches. Those are all the iliac arteries. So it's the branching from the dorsal aorta into smaller branches that go down to the legs and throughout the pelvis. And then one last thing I want to point out is the renal arteries. So here you can see this little blood vessel that comes off of the dorsal aorta, one going to each kidney, that branching lower. So those are the structures, the main structures that you need to know for your dissection. So please go over them and do a great job.